You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS radio station 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or on the web, WMCLive.com, where you can also find links to podcasts of all our previous shows. And we want to hear from you. Tweet us at hashtag WMCLive or email us at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. I don't know that anyone has ever done a program quite like our show this week. We're taking you inside, backstage sort of, into the workings of an organization dedicated to gaining visibility and power for women in the media. You guessed it, the Women's Media Center. Through today's interviews and my various commentaries, you are going to boldly go where no listener has gone before. But first, behind the headlines. We've been hanging out together for some months now, you and I, so I thought it was time I brought you home to meet some of the Women's Media Center family in person. We three mischievous co-founders, Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, could never have imagined that the WMC would grow so swiftly. It began as a small conference organized by Equality Now, a superb international women's human rights NGO founded by Jessica Neuwirth. Gloria and I were each going, and I invited Jane to join us. She and I had newly become friends when she read Saturday's Child, which was my memoir, and to my great delight, she found it inspiring and helpful while starting her own memoir and had contacted me. So at one point, the conference group was discussing miseries with media misrepresenting, underrepresenting, and flat-out ignoring women. Both Gloria and I spoke longingly of an old shared dream that the women's movement would have a strong media component for the sake of women and, frankly, for the sake of media. I mean, seriously, how can you have a genuine democracy when the populace gets only fragments of the picture filtered by an unrepresentative, largely white male media in thrall to corporate ownership and to advertisers? Later, I'll share some statistics about this, so be warned, start your deep breathing now. Anyway, back to the conference. I rattled on about how this media obsession of mine predated 1968, when, while I was organizing the first Miss America pageant protest, I'd alerted the press that we would recognize only women reporters, to pressure their reassignment from fashion and flower shows. Gloria spoke of yearning for a rapid response system to slam sexist comments by pundits and talk show hosts. We both fantasized about a training program to teach activists media skills and a database on women experts. Then Jane, whose posture is always irritatingly enviable, sat up even straighter than usual and sang out, "Well, let's just do it then." Do what? Do what? Gloria and I chorused in unison like girl backup singers. Start a women's media thing. I'll pledge a sum of money as a leap of faith. Let's use it as a challenge, see who we can get to match it. And she did. And we did. And they did. A few weeks later, we held a meeting at Gloria's, and brain power and experience began assembling. Women were hungry for this idea. Former news anchor Carol Jenkins, who would become our founding president, Pat Mitchell, in transit from the presidency of PBS to that of the Paley Center, who would become our first board chair, first responders and early funders, believing when there was nothing tangible yet to believe. Today, you'll hear from some of the women who work the daily, powerful magic of the Women's Media Center, and at the end of the show, I'll let you in on what we're currently up against. Meanwhile, welcome backstage, off camera, and behind the headlines. Here's what really goes on when women are making a revolution. First up is Kate McCarthy, director of SheSource. That's www.shesource.org, the WMC database of experts. Adept at political action and election strategies, both in the U.S. and her native Britain, Kate also has done crucial work on reproductive rights. Here is Kate McCarthy. Welcome, Kate. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I want to start with you before we get on to SheSource, of which you are the director. You are an experienced political campaigner, and for 7 years you were the head of the United Kingdom Labour Party's e-campaign department, and did media strategies and election strategies. Talk for a minute about that.
Yes, I was. I worked for both Prime Minister Tony Blair and Prime Minister Gordon Brown. I ran our electronic campaigning arm of the party, not the government, but the party. And that meant I put together the Labour Party's first interactive website. We did a lot of work on SMSing and texting and games online to try and generate good political messaging in the media. So, for example, we had a Pac-Man game where we would go around and show that the Conservatives would introduce a lot of cuts to public services as the Pac-Man character went and ate up schools and hospitals and things like that. And it was fascinating. It was really interesting being at the heart of political decision-making, particularly during election times.
It sounds like you brought the Labour Party into the 21st century, too, in terms of...
We tried. It's, I think, like anything, e-campaigning, using social media and the internet, as it's a tool, and what you need to do is try and ensure that you're using all of the tools that you have available to bring about the change you want to bring about.
Yes, precisely. And you also you've served on UNICEF's Parliamentary Advisory Group in the United Kingdom. You've done a lot of work with Voters for Choice and reproductive rights. What brought you to the Women's Media Center?
Well, back in the 90s, I'm British, as you can tell from my accent.
And
back in the 90s, I worked and lived in Washington, D.C. for a number of years. And I worked with Julie Burton, who's our amazing president at the Women's Media Centre.
She is.
And Gloria, who is the chair of our board and is also extraordinary, as you know. And I was the field director for Choice USA at that point and director of candidate services for Voters for Choice. And Julie and I worked very well together. We worked together for nearly 5 years back then. So when I came back to Washington a couple of years ago, she said, come and work with me again. She had just become the president of the Women's Media Centre, and she was building the organisation up to be an even stronger and more dynamic force. And I really welcomed the opportunity.
Well, we are so glad to have her and you, which brings us to what you do and to SheSource. So tell about SheSource, because it's one of my favorite of the projects or approaches or fronts that the Women's Media Center addresses.
Well, as you know, women are underrepresented in the media, and SheSource is one of the Women's Media Center projects that is really trying to counteract that. Even in the election coverage, just before the last election, when the so-called war on women discussed contraception and abortion and Planned Parenthood and women's issues, analysis shows that 81% of the people quoted on TV and 79% of the people quoted in print were men. And that's even when they were talking about women's issues, things that particularly pertain to women. So the Women's Media Centre tackles this underrepresentation of women in a very practical way. We have a list of hundreds and hundreds of media-experienced women experts who can talk on a wide range of issues, and we connect those experts with journalists and bookers and producers to try and change the face of the media.
Yes. What I love about this is that for the entirety of the current wave of feminism, which is not the second or the third wave, but more like the permanent wave, we've been saying, we need to have more women representing the majority of the population. And the answer was always, we'd love to, but we can't find qualified women, which, of course, was specious and untrue even when it was said. But this makes it impossible for them to say that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think what we are doing is we're helping the media improve itself. And the media really, the journalists that we work with really thank us for it. journalists are often working on really tight deadlines. They have their list of experts, which they always go to. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we shake that up a bit. We say, well, why go to that guy that you've always gone to? Why not come to us and find somebody who can talk to the same issue from a slightly different angle, who is a woman?
Mm-hmm. And are you finding less resistance now, or more open doors, a foot in the door?
I don't think that it's so much that we're finding resistance. I think that to change things, you have to put a lot of action. You've got to put a lot of energy into do it. Things don't just change by themselves. And so what we're doing a number of meetings with journalists and with outlets, and we're talking to them about what we can do to help them change the situation. So it's not so much that we're finding resistance. We're just people don't put the energy into it, and we're persuading them to put the energy into it. Mm-hmm. And it's happening gradually. I mean, it's not happening as fast as I would like. We have an extraordinary array of women, really fabulous women, who are very articulate and are brilliant on the TV or brilliant on radio and very good at giving interviews to print journalists. The journalists just need to pick up the phone, or they just need to send an email or go to the website and use us.
Yes, people should check it out on womensmediacenter.com and click on the SheSource button, and you will see this. Kate is absolutely right. This extraordinary array of experts, everything from, nuclear physicists to childcare. So it goes beyond the issues on which they always think, oh, well, that's a, quote, women's issue. It is, all issues are women's issues, and they're ready to speak on all of them. Tell me, have you noticed any discernible difference in the receptivity depending on the different kind of media, say print versus broadcasting or television versus radio? Is there any discernible difference on bookers' willingness to entertain new people? Or rather, people who've been there all along?
I think that radio, we've had particular success with radio, actually, and I think that's partly because you have outlets like NPR who have a lot of people being interviewed, and so they are always looking for new people, and they're receptive. NPR, they actually have somebody whose job it is to ensure that there is diversity in the people that they are using as their interview sources. So working with radio has worked particularly well. I think the programs, TV is more difficult because they have one or two talking heads, and often it's the same talking heads. And also I find TV is much more biased in their outlook, so people are coming from a very particular political standpoint. And so even though Fox will come to us and use us, and we welcome them using us, the women that we have on aren't always happy to be there because they've been undermined by some of the interviewers in certain situations. But TV has happened, and we've had some people. So we've worked with people like Soledad O'Brien, who've put a lot of our experts on a regular basis, and so that's been really important.
It's wonderful work. It is changing the landscape. We have to go.
I think one of the other things that's really interesting.
We've only got about.
Look at an issue, we don't just look at it from one issue. So, for example, if you're looking at foreign affairs, we'll have people who are academics who can talk about it. We'll have people who work on the ground in international development who can talk about it. We'll have the financiers and the economists who work on foreign affairs. So we have experts who look at issues from a whole variety of different angles.
It's
and
dynamite.
Then both young and old people and women and people from different geographical areas in the country and different races and ethnicities. So we look at issues from we have experts who can look at issues from a whole variety of different angles.
It's dynamite. We have to go, but thank you so much for explaining a little bit about SheSource and about Kate McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Robin.
We'll take a short break here. I'm Robin Morgan, and this is Women's Media Center Live. Next, what does name it, change it really mean? We'll find out in just a minute. After Hurricane Sandy, parts of the East Coast have returned to normal, but others won't see normal again for quite some time. One group getting volunteers and aid supplies to those who need it is called Occupy Sandy. Made up of a coalition of Occupy Wall Street activists, community organizers, and technologists, Occupy Sandy is using social media and other software tools to identify and quickly respond to urgent needs among the hardest-hit communities. You can help. To donate or to volunteer, visit occupysandy.org.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And we're back. We're back with Rachel Larris, Communications Manager at the Women's Media Center. Previously, she was Communications Director at American Forum and the National Women's Editorial Forum. Rachel oversees the WMC Name It, Change It project, so can tell you all about it. Welcome, Rachel, to Women's Media Center Live.
Hi, Robin. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, this is the family show in which we bring people behind the scenes. I want to talk just for a minute about who you are, the woman who runs Name It, Change It, and does so many other things. You're the communications manager, and you've been communications director at American Forum and the National Women's Editorial Forum. Being communications manager at something called the Women's Media Center is an ironic, interesting title. In addition to Name It, Change It, say a little about that.
Oh, sure. I mean, one of the things that I do as part of the Women's Media Center team, and we really are a team, is that we're monitoring, obviously, constant events in the media and whether the Women's Media Center needs to react to something. So I'm scanning our inbox, I'm looking sort of the daily headlines and seeing if there's specifically something that we need to react to, or perhaps put out a public petition on, or do some other type of direct action, or even just suggest it as a topic for our She Party, or for our lovely radio show, or any of the number of sexism that exists in the media that we, as the Women's Media Center, as a team, might want to respond to in one of our many, many wonderful programs and functions.
Yeah, I should say just parenthetically here that She Party is a weekly gathering on Twitter. Am I correct?
Absolutely. It's every Wednesday from 3 p.m. Eastern Time to 5 p.m. And anybody who wants to join in can follow it on Twitter with the hashtag SheParty, SEH Party.
And honest to God, Rachel, when you talk about the monitoring that you do, this was our dream, Jane and Gloria and I, when we founded the Women's Media Center. I remember saying, we need a war room, which, since I'm a peace activist, is a strange thing to say, but you know exactly what I mean. We need to have a rapid response team, and you're it. So I thank you for everything that you do. Talk now to us about...
Well, I don't think I'm just it. I think a lot of members of the Women's Media Center team are also very crucial aspects, but definitely we've had many late-night war rooms in terms of responding to something that's pretty egregious and needs response to.
Well, that's what's elicited the apologies from a number of male anchors and other presences on television and radio and broadcasting and print. Which brings us to the project that you direct, Name It, Change It. Tell the Women's Media Center Live listeners about that.
Sure. So widespread sexism in the media is really a top problem facing women, obviously, and it's sort of the raison d'etre of one of the raison d'etres of the Women's Media Center. But media sexism is particularly harmful for women in political office, both as candidates and then when they are, serving in either elected or appointed office, because media sexism degrades the status of women in the eyes of the public. And so because political media sexism is such a specific type, and actually we see it reflected in sort of real, what we believe as real world results, because right now only 19% of Congress is female. That's up a little bit from 17%. but it's not anywhere close to parity. And the U.S. is, I believe, ranked 76th in the world for our number of women that serve in legislative office. So, because of that, the Women's Media Center, along with our partner, She Should Run, has created a special project to hold the media accountable. And what we do is identify, prevent, and end sexist media coverage of women candidates and politicians. And we do this. We've published groundbreaking research just to demonstrate exactly how sexist media harms, women candidates as well as women politicians and public leaders. But we also really, try to educate the media on sort of this disparate impact of sexism and how it affects women, how sexism in the media affects women politicians differently than sort of harsh, critical coverage does. But a lot of that is obviously sometimes calling out. That's why the project is called the Name It, Change It project, because if you can't identify the problem, you're never going to be able to change it.
Right. And what I'm also very proud of is that Name It, Change It has been an equal opportunity defender of people whose politics we might not necessarily agree with at all. Ultra-conservatives, right-wingers like Sarah Palin or Michelle Bachmann, when they are treated demeaningly because they're female by the media, we have been there defending them. The same way that we'd have for Hillary Clinton or anyone who is a feminist or left of center.
Absolutely. We defend all women who are either candidates for office or currently sitting elected officials, because obviously media sexism hurts their standing in the eyes of both the general public and voters, and makes them and that effectively makes them seen as being less effective than they may be, and diminishes them in stature. And so there is plenty of harsh and fair criticism that is not sexist, and members of the media are perfectly, welcome to make obviously very critical coverage of women candidates' policies, but fashion coverage and
hairstyles,
comments about women's appearance and their family life and their sex lives, these are all out of bounds and something that you don't really see that is done to male politicians. So that's why the Name It, Change It project exists, and absolutely we are bipartisan and feel that when you attack one woman, you attack all women.
And apologies have been wrung from the likes of Chris Matthews and Ed Schultz and a whole lot of guys who are beginning to gather that they can't do this with impunity.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things about calling out sexism, too, is that even when media personalities and media organizations don't issue apologies, they've been put on notice. And one of the things that we have seen, or at least we observed, is that there are sometimes less jokes on late-night cable news that are of a sexist nature devoted to sitting politicians. That was a marked decrease from what we found when we launched the project, and I think that's because some of these late-night comics, and not everybody, and there are incidents that we still need to call out, but I think that these guys have been put on notice, and they're all guys. The late-night comics are all guys.
Sure.
The late-night talk show hosts, they're all guys, and I think that they've been put on notice, and they know that if they make a really sexist crack, they're going to get called on it, and so I think it makes them a little gun-shy, and rightfully so. And one thing I wanted to add was that if anybody is interested in following the Name It, Change It project, or frankly helping us out, we have the Twitter tag at Name It, Change It. We also have a report it function on our website, nameitchangeit.org, and we really encourage the public, your listeners and everyone, to call out media sexism where they see it, both to the Women's Media Center and to Name It, Change It, because, we can't be everywhere, but everyone is everywhere, and we're really hoping that the more eyes and ears out there, the less media sexism there will be.
I just want to thank you for everything that you do and the work that you do and the way that you do it, and for being your funny, terrific self, and for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. And now it's time for verbal karate. The great philosopher Suzanne K. Langer wrote, quote, "The notion of giving something a name is the vastest generative idea that ever was conceived," close quote. And I would add, abusing that notion, misnaming, is comparably just as destructive. Some days I think I'm getting bitter and loopy from nagging at people that language matters, that it both reflects and defines reality. The thing is, deliberate stupidity seems to grow back with alarming plasticity. Every day I pass bus stop posters hyping a particular History Channel series now available in DVD, and every day they make me crazy. In huge letters, the text reads, "Mankind, the story of all of us." Honest to God, in 2013, that's what it reads. Which means one of two things. Either the bloody idiots behind the ad campaign didn't even realize they were celebrating an oxymoron, or else they actually thought they were being clever by reassuring the female majority of humanity that the name for the male minority was actually really intended to include them. So be good sports, girls. I'm thinking of having stickers made to plaster on the signs reading, "If it's the story of mankind, numbskulls, then it can't be the story of all of us." Okay, I'll be calm. Deep breaths. But if any of you feel like complaining to the History Channel's corporate owner, the Arts and Entertainment Channel, let me know. Their email is aefeedback@aenetworks.com. Meanwhile, we could devise a series called Womankind, the Story of All of Us, and see if any TV channel is interested. Don't hold your breath. Time for another pause. I'm Robin Morgan, here with Women's Media Center Live. We'll return in a minute with the director of the Women's Media Center Project on sexualized violence in conflict situations.
When it comes to talk radio, men still do most of the talking. It doesn't get too much better if you look at television, newspapers, film, video games, social media, literature, sports, and corporate or technology leadership. The Women's Media Center's Status of Women in the U.S. Media 2013 report details the persistent gender disparity in a range of media institutions that rank among the greatest influencers in American society. To read the full report, go to womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome back. Next up is Lauren Wolfe, an award-winning journalist who's written for publications from The Guardian to The Atlantic. Previously the senior editor of the Committee to Protect Journalists, she is now the director of the WMC's Women Under Siege project. Welcome, Lauren, to Women's Media Center Live, which is part of the Women's Media Center family, as you are. Welcome.
Hi, Robin. Thank you.
Well, you are the director of one of the proudest projects that Women's Media Center has yet come up with, which is Women Under Siege. And just talk about what it is and what the WMC's Women Under Siege does.
Really what we're doing is looking very globally at how rape is used as a tool of war. We've reached all the way back to the Holocaust. The idea, at least in Gloria Steinem's mind, was that she didn't know what had really happened in terms of rape in the Holocaust, and when she read about it, she was pretty shocked. So the idea was to look at that, go up through time, look at Rwanda and Bosnia and Bangladesh and Guatemala, and go up to the present, up to the Arab Spring countries, into the Democratic Republic of Congo, and really try to identify patterns, how rape is being used as a tool to manipulate women and to really tear apart communities.
And the whole concept of sexualized violence in war either was completely ignored until now, or was taken, it's a contradiction in itself, or was taken as a just ho-hum, what else, you rape and take spoil. But I don't think it had been realized really until very recently, and what makes this project so important to me is the systemic quality of it through ethnic cleansing, ethnic rapes, and making the connections that rape
it's right. It's funny because you said that people just kind of think of this as an everyday thing, and you think of the phrase raping and looting, and it just kind of it destroys me, because I feel like, why do those two things automatically go together, and why are they so easily dismissed?
Right.
Even if something is not systemic, if we can't yet identify that, say, in Syria, that the government is ordering forces to actually rape women and destroy children and torture people, if we can't actually say that that's systemic, we can say that they know at this point it's happening.
Yes.
But to me, that's kind of the key thing to realize, that if a government knows it's happening, then they're responsible.
Yes, and there now is a precedent that rape in used as a weapon in war is a crime against humanity. That comes out of the Arusha trials. Talk about the crowd map, because that is unique on the site of Women Under Siege.
Sure. It's we have a map. It is a live crowdsourced map of sexualized violence in Syria. So what that is people can come to womenunderSiegeSyria.crowdmap.com. They can fill out a form. Their information is completely anonymous. We then evaluate the information and hopefully do a little more reporting, and we end up posting it online for everyone to see. So this is a public-facing. And what it does is it tracks types of sexualized violence, everything from groping up through gang rape and sexual enslavement, and it tracks the perpetrators. So you can go online and check off whether it was government forces, non-government, Shabiha, which are the plainclothes militiamen. From there, basically what we've done is get a sense geographically and kind of in the tenor of what might be happening to women. And we're also tracking rape of men, too, in Syria.
And the two sort of fronts of Women Under Siege, one is a public education plan to show how rape is a tool of war, a strategic tool, not just a crime of war. And the other, an action plan to push for the creation of legal, diplomatic, and public interventions, I'm reading from your website right now, to ensure the United Nations and international tribunals and agencies will understand the gender-based threats as a tool of genocide, and will do something about that. Talk a little about the effect that the website and the project has had, because I think that's quite remarkable.
It's been pretty eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people. There's never been a live map of how rape is used in war the way we have in Syria. Usually these things are kind of gathered after the fact, and a lot of evidence is lost. In Syria, we've realized that 20% of the women in our reports were killed after rape or killed themselves because of stigma. But basically, the idea is to make an impact right now, get people to understand these patterns, try to do something about what's happening in places like Congo or Burma before it's too late. And we've had some real success so far. I was in the UK a couple weeks ago presenting our work on Syria to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. We came up with some specific recommendations that we handed to William Hague, and he has been responding to them one by one. I've also been contacted by the White House and the State Department, and I'm working on the sidelines with them, talking about what they can be doing better in terms of stopping sexualized violence in Syria.
And I know you've testified at the United Nations, haven't you?
Right. In July, I actually went there to present our findings. And in that room, there were member states, from Egypt, from, I think, Canada was there. And we were told that the Syrians would be there, but they actually didn't show up that day. And
the crowd map so far is specifically for Syria, because we haven't yet expanded to crowd maps in other areas. Am I correct?
That's right. We're looking at doing it in different places, but a place like Congo, which is called, offhand, it's called the rape capital of the world. Yeah. It would be really great to do something like that there. There are a lot of considerations, security considerations, internet penetration. So we're kind of evaluating where might be a good place to expand this kind of work.
I've often thought, since the Arusha decision which was handed down by the Arusha court on on rape in war, and which once and for all set a precedent saying that it was a crime against humanity. I've thought to myself, well, if rape in war is a crime against humanity, then what in hell is it in peacetime? But that's the kind
I've always loved when you said that, and it's actually something I've begun repeating.
Well, but it's an essential feminist question, because the truth of the matter is one step at a time, and rape in war as you say, a matter of policy, a directed strategy toward crushing the other side, because of course women are just the envelope to carry the message. So if you rape their women, then it's a means of humiliating their men and impregnate their women with yours. I mean, it's in a sense the essential act of patriarchy that you're addressing, and it's shocking that it's taken this long to really uncover it and address it. But thankfully, that's exactly what you're doing. How can people help women under siege? How can they become involved if they want to?
The first thing I would say is that we're a public information project first and foremost. Like you said, it's shocking how long it's taken for people to understand what's going on. To me, these stories, if they make the news at all, they're never front page news. We're starting to see them on the front page. CNN just did something with our work on Syria, and they did put it front and central on their homepage, and that was really surprising and really excellent.
That's huge.
So first and foremost, I think people can help us spread this information. We can't do much until people know what's happening. The other thing is we're coming up with a few different specific actions people can take, in terms of, say, for instance, abortion is actually outlawed in a number of countries, but more than that, when a woman has been raped, she's not able to go to a clinic to have an abortion because U.S. funding is restricted in a lot of countries where, we'll say, for instance, in Sudan, the U.S. is not allowed to provide abortion services for women who've been raped in conflict.
Right.
And women have no other place to go, basically, because the U.S. is providing the only medical service in, say, a particular city. So something like that. There are action points that we're going to create some rallying around. So
people need to check the website regularly and continuously, and they can access the website one of two ways. They can go to womensmediacenter.com and link to Women Under Siege from there, or they can go direct to womenundersiegeproject.org. Thank you, and thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thanks, Robin.
This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. We'll return in a minute with the woman who knows what you really need to know and want to read, who assigns it and edits it, all in time for scanning with your morning coffee. Stick around.
Women in Film International Committee, the Cuban Women Filmmakers Mediathek, and the Cuban Film Institute launched their Tri-City Showcase in March. It's the first time a group of Cuban women filmmakers will travel to the U.S. to screen their work. They include award-winning Cuban filmmakers Marina Ochoa, Gloria Rolando, Milena Almira, and one of Cuba's most internationally acclaimed actresses, Claudia Rojas. More information is available at www.wif.org/Cuba.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And we're back again, this time talking with Mary Thom, Editor-in-Chief of the WMC website. All that original feature writing you can find nowhere else. That's the product of Mary's editorial expertise. By the way, folks can send in story ideas by going to womensmediacenter.com, clicking on Take Action, and then clicking on Write for Us. For years an editor at Ms. Magazine, Mary's consulted for the National Council for Research on Women, among other major organizations, and has written a number of books herself, all of which we will discuss. Welcome, Mary, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin. It's really good to be here with you.
Well, you and I go way back to Ms. and when Pleistocene era dinosaurs roamed the earth. So before we get into the Women's Media Center exclusives and features and the site of which you're the website of which you're the editor-in-chief, let's talk a little bit about how we met at Ms. Magazine and your years there and your books, Inside Ms., 25 Years of the Magazine and the Movement, and Letters to Ms., and all the other things that you do as a really first-rate editor and writer.
Yes. Well, we did. We met in the early 70s because that's when Ms. began. And I came on first as a researcher and also as a writer, and started almost immediately editing something called the Ms. Gazette, which were stories from all over the U.S. It was mostly the U.S., although we had some international coverage then. So I've been working as an editor on topics of concern to women and feminism for, basically my entire work life. And that is the kind of thing that led to the books that I wrote.
Right.
So and you were at Ms., and so we worked together on various stories, and we're in editorial meetings, and we discussed important issues, and sometimes argued, and sometimes agreed, and it was a wonderfully lively staff there at the magazine, wouldn't you think?
Yes,
wouldn't you agree?
I think so very much, and I think we've carried with us those qualities into the Women's Media Center. Maybe they're feminist qualities or feminist media qualities. I don't know, but there's something familiar going on.
No, it is familiar, and it feels very comfortable because it's a kind of atmosphere, the best for journalism, where you can have opinions and have agreements and disagreements, and you can ask for help and you can ask for assistance, and it's in a sense of cooperation and support.
And it's to make the work better.
Exactly.
So it's not that ego gets left at the door, but ego gets put in the employ of making the product, the writing, the journalism, the essay, the book, whatever, better.
Yes, exactly. I suppose that's what I value most about the feminist environment, work environment that we've managed to create and maintain over the years.
Yeah, it's very precious, and I don't think it's that common outside of the women's movement. Well, tell the listeners what you do, because I think there's a mystique about it, as the editor-in-chief of the website, and how you find these stories, dream up these assignments, find the right writer and match her to the assignment, get it all done and edited and sometimes translated from another language and up on the site by a certain time. It's quite a coup, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely an undertaking that takes all your attention and all your senses. And it starts with a good grounding in the material that you are dealing with. If I were starting off as an editor, I could never do this job I'm doing now. But I started off, as we were talking about, at Ms., and I had the advantage of lots and lots of people around who helped me learn my craft, but also came in with ideas and had perspectives on issues. So I've been working with these issues for many, many years. So for me, it's a matter of keeping up with the news, with what's happening and how it's reported in the mainstream press and in the alternative press, and then seeing where the holes are, seeing where we at the Women's Media Center could make a difference by providing a different perspective or providing information that's been left out of stories, or also providing a platform for new writers who are unable to get a platform elsewhere, new young feminist writers who are eager to express themselves in a place where their work is appreciated and where readers will read it with understanding and give them feedback as well.
And it's
so that's what I do, and then I depend on writers who have written for me once or have written for me years ago, also to come up with ideas of their own, and then we talk about them, usually by email, and shape the focus. And then our pieces are generally around 800 words, and they're both commentaries and news reports. And so that's a lot of my job is working with people who bring me ideas and focusing them so that they make sense on our site.
And it's become very popular because our pieces are picked up and in some cases go viral on the internet. But in any event, they're picked up by Alternet and by The Guardian in the United Kingdom and by a lot of other places, aren't they? Yes, they are, and that's very exciting. So a lot of what's in it for writers who write for us is that they'd like what we provide. But they also like the exposure in the context of the Women's Media Center because then, as you say, they get picked up and distributed. And they're free to say stuff that, I speak as one of them, that you can't necessarily say elsewhere, even on the supposedly wonderfully free internet. This is like a different space, an alternate reality where there are stories that just don't make it in the sexism of the so-called real world. Make it, and I think a lot. And that's very important. But it's also important that we maintain journalistic standards on our site. So talk about that. Yes, a sort of completely orderless and lawless blog. Where, good. Yes. We are very careful with our facts. We're very careful to check things. We're careful to present, when we present opinions, we make sure that, you can see where they're coming from and argue them so that they're cognate, so that people who may disagree can be persuaded. And that's very important, I think, too. I think it's very important. And I also must confess that I think it's quite wonderful that you have a policy where, although it's a humble honorarium, writers are nonetheless paid something. I might point out... Very important. Because it's a respect for the journalist, for the writer. And I might point out that Huffington Post does not. They have a great deal of money, more probably doubtless than the Women's Media Center, but they don't pay writers. So I just think it puts things on a professional level, however humble, of respect and mutual respect, and I applaud you for that. Yes, and I applaud our whole organization for making sure that we have that in our budget. And writers really do appreciate it because they appreciate both the honorarium and the fact that I am very careful with their words and very careful to get back to them with any changes that I think we should make and to discuss those changes and come to a mutual agreement. All of these things are not, evidently, from what people tell me, are not normal. Yes, they should be. In the writer's experience when they work on the web. Yeah, they damn well should be. Yeah. And how often do you post stories now? Well, we've been doing, I definitely have 2 stories a week and sometimes 3. It depends, and sometimes 4 if the news calls for it. But it depends on what happens in the world. I plan for 2 stories a week, and then if something happens that we need another story, then there's room for that. So we can put it in. You have to remain fluid. Yeah. We've got to go, but thank you, Mary. Thank you for the website and the excellence with which those stories are edited and assigned and edited. And thank you, Robin. Thank you for your contributions. Well, some of our best stories have come from you. It's a pleasure to work with you as an editor. And thank you, Mary, for being on Women's Media Center Live. Thank you, Robin. And it's time for Fighting Words. The next time somebody scoffs to you that women have it made now, and look at those anchor women millionaires, which you can count on the fingers of one hand, you brandish the Women's Media Center 2012 Status of Women in Media Report, which you can find on the website www.womensmediacenter.com. I'm going to give you some samples. TV news directors, 71% are men. I'm rounding down. Of all radio news directors, 81% men. Of the local radio news force, 78% men. The 2011, quote, Heavy 100 most important radio talk shows in America, you guessed it, 87% men. News sources on NPR, supposedly the good guys, 74% men. Guests on Sunday news talk shows, NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, and Fox News, 78% men. TV sports anchor positions, 92% men. I'm not even going to go into sports editors and columnists because you're just going to get nauseous. Directors of the top-grossing 250 films, 95% men. Writers of the top-grossing films, 86% men. Directors for all episodic TV, 88% men. Now let's look at newspapers. In 2011, women represented 40% of newspaper newsroom employees, and they were all at the bottom of the pyramid. Let's just glance at newsmakers. Studies of newsmakers' gender show women are less likely than men to be the subjects of news stories. It affects content. The Media and Gender Monitor of 2011 reported that globally 24% of news stories only are about women. In stories about politics and government, women were the focus of 12% of stories in 2000, increasing to an impressive whopping 19%. 19 in 2010. According to the Global Media Monitoring Project, women represent 23% of newsmakers on the 84 news websites that they monitor. And let's have a glance at reviews of literature by women. Men wrote 62% of books reviewed by the New York Times between July 2008 and August 2010. In 2011, 59% of fiction reviewed in the New York Times was written by men, and a review of 13 publishing houses' 2010 catalogs showed that 55% of books published were written by men. Women also were the majority among reviewers. Well, I could go on, but you see. By the way, new media is no better, and in some cases worse. Now consider the distorted perspective we are given on reality. This is not just about getting more token women into media. It's about transforming media to build a genuine, informed democracy. And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS station 1580 AM radio in Washington, D.C., and on the web at WMCLive.com, which also has podcasts of our previous shows. Remember to email us at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams-Chancellor, Technical Director Michelle Kinsey-Bruns, and our founding sponsor Regina Kulik-Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us. Join us next Saturday, 11 a.m. here at the Talk Show with a Brain, Women's Media Center, live.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.